Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Walk the ball. Reyes Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. We appreciate you joining us. Huge show tonight. As you can see, 4 people on the screen, which means you know it's going to be fun. We're talking Dodgers prospects, Dodgers farm system. Justin Lorber, friend of the show, here to join us in asking some questions of a couple guys who have spent a large portion of the last, 3 to 6 months of their lives talking about prospects around the league. And it sounds like specifically a lot of Dodgers ones. So joining us from Baseball Prospectus, we've got Jeffrey Paternostro, Jarrett Seidler. Guys, we appreciate you joining us. You ready to talk some Dodger prospects?
Yeah.
Jarrett, how we doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We put 9 prospects on the top 101 from the Dodgers, which was more than any other team.
Could have been 11 or 12 too, in all honesty.
James Outman was like the second to last cut, so it was very close to being. The last 2 cuts were him and Chase the Lauder, so it was very close to being 10.
Okay, well, I've got to pace myself here. I want to ask you about a million questions about James Outman, but I've got to restrain myself so that the commenters who know my love for Outman don't get going. Normally, I'd start with kind of a softball about kind of the process or how this has been going, but because we're limited on time and because I've got about a million questions, I feel like I'm just going to jump right in here. So I'm going to ask a couple. Justin will hop in with a question from time to time, but you mentioned it, 9 guys in the top 101, more than any other team, which is obviously hilarious based on where the Dodgers draft and how small their international free agent pool normally is. But let's start with at the top, Diego Cartaya. I've heard Keith Law, I believe, has said he has number 1 overall prospect potential in his mind. I'm curious, from your guys' perspective, do you see that sort of ceiling for Cartaya, or are there some concerns that maybe think right around where he's at 19, I believe, is kind of maybe where he tops out on this list?
So I would say that, in most years, the difference between Cartaya, where he is, and Francisco Alvarez at 4 would be a huge gap, bigger than any gap really in the back half of the list. This year was a little weird, where I think you can make a case, Cartaya, as far as that gap is sort of ordinally, Cartaya is not that far off Alvarez for best catching prospect in baseball. And I've had scouts make the argument to me that Cartaya is a better catching prospect than Alvarez. I can't quite get there just because Alvarez has hit at higher levels. I don't think Cartaya is specifically more likely to be a catcher long-term or a better defender. I think they'll both end up catching, but I don't think there's anything to tilt the scales either way there. And, Cartaya has not had a great track record of staying healthy. If you can hit 270 with 35 home runs and catch, which I think is probably a reasonable upside case for Cartaya, ahead of like sort of our Roll 6 OFP, but not that far, 80th, 90th percentile outcome. Yeah, I mean, if you want to rank a catcher the best prospect in baseball, that'd be the kind of catcher you'd rank, I think, Jarrett.
Yeah, it's not. There's also like some contact questions there. It's not like the strikeout rate's not awful, but it's also not good. I'm now also quickly looking this up on my phone, so I don't completely.
It was 27% last year. I looked at our list before we did this because I'm a professional.
That wasn't actually what I was looking up. It's like slightly below average zone contact for the level, which like is not like super great. Like it's not exactly what you want. So kind of the contact's going to have to improve. Well, look, Jeffrey said 270. The guy hit like 255 in the minors this year. So he's got a little ways to go. He's, you compare him to Alvarez. Cartaya's in the low minors. Alvarez is in the high minors. They're close to the same age, which is, obviously if one guy's 2 levels lower, but only a year younger, it's, he's kind of a little bit behind, but he's a little bit behind the number 4 prospect in baseball. So it's not like that's he's within the range where it's not impossible to say he's going to be the best prospect in baseball at this time next year, but we're going to have to see some, if he's hitting 300 and that zone contact is up into like the 80 range at mid-season, all of a sudden now we're talking about him as one of the best prospects. And that is possible. The Dodgers have gotten those kinds of improvements out of guys, including catching prod. Will Smith did that a few years ago, where all of a sudden he's at AA and his zone contact rate shoots up and he's hitting fly balls over the fence all of a sudden. So that's not impossible, but he's not like, there's like 10 guys that are more like Jackson Merrill's more likely to take that step. Jackson Holiday is more likely to take that step. Emmanuel Rodriguez, who's considerably further down the list just because he didn't play much last year, is probably a little more likely to take that step. But he's within that. He has kind of the overall tool set and the overall broad skills, and is in the organization where those kinds of gains do happen sometimes.
Okay. Well, let me shift from Cartaya then before Justin gets a question in a moment. Let me ask you about the pitchers. Bobby Miller, sort of wherever you look, including your guys' list, he's the number two prospect in the system, the best pitching prospect. You've got him at 27, and then you've got Stone at 50, which I think most people that are following the Dodgers farm system were kind of like, okay, that makes sense. And then Nestrini's at 54, which I want to get to him because that's a riser, it feels like, on a lot of these lists, not ranked previously. But Jarrett, you even said that the gap between these three guys might be smaller than most people think. So talk to me a little bit about kind of how you see those three, because I know this list might not necessarily reflect your individual rankings so much as sort of a combination of everyone's. But talk to me about those three guys.
Yeah, I didn't express this enough at the time, and I regret that. I think Stone should be a little bit higher on here. I think he should probably be 15 spots higher. And I kind of sort of came to some of that conclusion after we locked this list a month and a half ago now. So even though it didn't publish until last week, we locked it for the book quite some time ago. And I was just kind of looking at like some pitch metrics, and then Jeffrey was actually the one that sent me some of the pitch metrics from when he was it's like, yeah, like, does Gavin Stone actually have like an 8 changeup? Because it just like has like whiffs as many batters as like any pitch in the entire minor leagues, like most pitches in the majors. It's not like it would be as a slider, but it's like in like the kind of general combination. So if you're like looking at this from like, okay, this guy's got like the same kind of pitch mix as the guys in this area, where it's like a plus fastball and a really good other pitch, but his really good pitch is a 7 or 8 changeup instead of a 6 or 7 slider, which like everybody has a 6 or 7 slider, including Nestrini. So, it's like, man, maybe we underranked him. There's like some weird priors there too, which kind of play in. But I kind of think maybe in retrospect, he's a little closer to Miller than he is Nestrini, and maybe that gap is not quite as accurately reflected on the list. So, yeah, I'm actually saying I think he should be even higher, right? So, Miller's just kind of a really nice overall pitching prospect. I'll cop to this. I watched the Pipeline show on MLB Network the other day, and they said he had, I think it was Steve Phillips said he had like the best 4-pitch mix of any starter in the minor leagues. And I'm like, am I allowed to curse on this? I don't.
Whatever.
I'm like, okay, but you just talked about Grayson Rodriguez and Andrew Painter a couple of minutes ago. You sure about that? So, but he's got like a really good, like in a system that has a lot of like weird optimized guys from like small schools. So like Gavin Stone's a later round draft pick that kind of came, or a middle round draft pick that came out of nowhere. Nestrini is a 4th round draft pick that had TOS, quit his college team, got the yips. They drafted him out of a men's league, like just like a really weird background. Bobby Miller went to a major college and pitched well and got drafted in the 1st round. So he's like much more, he's still optimized, but he's also like the guy who touches 100 and has 4 pitches and all that type of stuff. So like he kind of fits in more with your traditional prospects. And then we get to all the guys that they pulled out of extremely random places and then all of a sudden showed up. Like I start in March, I'm like getting reports from scouts out of Arizona that like, yeah, this Dodgers 4th round pick who walked like 10 guys per 9 at UCLA all of a sudden is like 98 with 2+ off speeds and throwing strikes. And I'm like, yeah, of course he is. And then There were people saying similar stuff about Emmett Sheehan at the time, who I know missed a lot of the season with injury, but when he was actually healthy, was throwing, 95, 96 with like a great fastball movement profile. And he's got one of those like really short, wacky arm actions that just like beats everybody up in the zone. So it's just like, I don't think the general baseball fan base, I'm guessing you guys realize how good the Dodgers are at minor league pitch design, but I don't think that's been internalized through like everybody yet. They're not necessarily the best team at any one thing. Like the Guardians are strictly speaking better at fastball velocity development. Tampa is strictly speaking better at optimizing guys' arm slots, but they're like second or third best at every single thing. And these guys just keep like popping out of the woodwork everywhere. And they're also one of the best teams at amateur scouting. And as we're going to talk about with Nick Frasso, professional scouting too. So it's just like, I don't know, these guys they come from everywhere now. It's wonderful.
Hey, for a small market team like us who can't afford to go over the luxury tax, these are the types of things we need to do to be successful.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, what do you think about the sort of those top three guys specifically?
Yeah, I would have, again, I kind of agree with Jarrett that Gavin Stone probably should have been higher. I think last year I came on here and said I wasn't really into Bobby Miller because of the command profile. And I'm still not really into Bobby Miller because of the command profile. But he pitched a full season, more stretched out as a starter. I'm more convinced he's a starter. And yeah, it's still like below average command. But when it's 97 to 100, 2+ breaking balls, and maybe a plus change, like you don't have to be that fine with your margins. It would be interesting. He started throwing a little bit of a hard sinker more often. That might actually be a better look for him, and as a fastball look, just to give him a kind of bounce off the command issues he has with the four seam, just to keep hitters from sitting on it. And he can also do weird pitch mix stuff where he's throwing the breaking ball and the changeups 60% of the time, and it won't really matter. I just watched Gavin Stone pitch, and he's one where you look at it visually, it looks like a really good changeup. It looks like a plus changeup. It does not look like an 8 changeup, but the outputs on it are so good. And he can throw it 40% of the time and get swinging strike after swinging strike, and guys just can't touch it. And you can't really sit it because the fastball slider combination is pretty good. And again, as Jarrett said, it's a background thing, right? I think it was a small college reliever, if I recall correctly, that they converted to starting pitching. And just the first year he was really fully stretched out. And he had video game numbers last year too, but it was in the low minors. Now that he's done it in the high minors, it's just kind of like, just drop him in the rotation. Like he should probably be in the opening day rotation, in all honesty. And they're going to have 5 guys fill those spots that aren't going to be Gavin Stone, but they just have an endless, maybe you just use them as a 2-inning reliever for a year and then see what happens this time next year. Somebody gets Tommy John surgery, or Clayton Kershaw decides to hang it up, or finally go to the Rangers, or some other thing happens, or Gavin Stone just they used Urias, they used Victor Gonzalez in those kind of roles for a number of years before they kind of transitioned to, Gonzalez got hurt, but Urias transitioned to full-time starting. Gonsolin is another guy that transitioned to full-time starting. They're very flexible with the way they use their pitching staff. And I think with Buehler out this year, they're gonna. I don't know if they're gonna do strict piggybacks with guys like May and Gonsolin and whoever else, but they are very willing to just throw a guy 4 innings here and there. And I think in the short term, Stone might be a good fit for that. Nastrini, Jarrett said he's throwing strikes. He's throwing more strikes.
To be clear, Jeffrey cares way more about command than I do.
Yes. Yeah.
I care more about pitch analytics, and Jeffrey cares way more about command. That's
at a certain point, you can't walk 6 per 9.
But he's not there yet. So.
He's not. Yeah. I did note when I was doing this list, we'll talk about all the pitchers in the top 101, which include Nastrini and Nick Frasso as well. You can go down to guys like Ronan Kopp and Maddox Bruns and Peter Hubick even. And those guys are way behind on strike throwing, even compared to Nick Nastrini and Emmett Sheehan. But if they even get a little bit of a jump on those guys, all of a sudden you've got another potential top one-on-one name next year. And those are still guys that are in the low minors and have limited professional reps. And you can go down to River Ryan, who they pulled out of the Padres, or he was a two-way player from a small North Carolina school that I think he was hitting in their complex last year. He was like an Arizona complex league guy, pulled him out of there, made him a full-time pitcher. And he's got, again, all the stupid pitch traits. He's a little bit older. I think he's like 23 or 24 now, but you get enough of these guys, like 2 or 3 of them are going to jump and become number 2 starters. That's just the way it works, especially when you're this good at player development. So, this is what it is right now this year. Nick Nastrini wasn't on our radar last year. Gavin Stone was, but not at this level. Emmett Sheehan wasn't, obviously. I'm sure there's going to be somebody that I'm not a really unexpected jumps. I just rattled off like 6 guys, but they're certainly capable of getting these kind of jumps going forward too.
Let me ask one quick follow-up. Of those 3, is Stone the guy that you would say is most likely to contribute in 2023 at the big league level? I mean, like, if you had to pick one, like, would you bet on Stone sort of making the biggest impact this season?
It's probably Miller, just on proximity, and I think he would fit better in that kind of bulk inning role that they've used to transition some of these guys just because of the pitch mix. But flip a coin, really. I think Stone, man. The more Jarrett and I talk about this, should we just rank Gavin Stone ahead of Bobby Miller? Like, I feel like we're talking ourselves into it at this moment. I don't think that's actually true, but I think you can make an argument. Like, also Miller has like a 7 changeup. It's not like it's a bad pitch either. Stone just fills up the zone more, and I think when you make that jump from AAA to the majors, I do think that's an important delineation point. The ability to throw strikes and throw good strikes. Yeah, you got to get chases too, and he'll get that with his changeup. I just feel like Miller might be a guy who has to nibble a little bit more, and he might be coming to a situation where he has to come in with his fastball and guys will hit it. But that's been one of those things that I think gets sorted out in March. It's like, who comes to camp good, and what role do you need to fill on your pitching staff in the short term?
I was just going to throw in Nastrini. Now, Nastrini obviously has really good pitch analytics. He's a guy that on a TrackMan readout looks really good. I was not actually the person pounding the table for Nastrini, even though I'm like our local TrackMan fanatic. It was our Midwest League guy, Nathan Graham, who saw him a bunch of times pitching for Great Lakes, and just like, so from like an iScout perspective, he was pounding the table for him in like the 50s, which, given his interesting background and command issues, I think probably says a lot.
And it's like, they're all weird deliveries, but this is also a pretty weird delivery.
Yes. But Nathan was just like really pounding the table during the process for Nastrini. More than some of the other guys he'd seen at Great Lakes over the years.
Gotcha. Justin, you want to ask?
Yeah. So you guys, in my perception, have always had Miguel Vargas maybe a little bit higher relative to some of the other national publications. It feels like the last year or so, the industry has maybe caught up a little bit, which is an eval that, so far has turned out to look pretty good. Kind of curious what you guys saw maybe 2-3 years ago and how he's developed in your mind and remains pretty relevant as a prospect.
This is a Jeffrey Paternostro joint.
So this one, I don't read other lists. People send me other lists, but I don't really follow them. I did not watch the pipeline.
I read every other list that exists.
Yeah.
So
I guess
it's actually part of my job is to make sure that like we're not like accidentally copying stuff from other people.
Yeah. So I mean, our Cal League guys loved him. I think we had like 3 people in the Cal that year. They all wrote him up great. I don't know, it was Instructs or it must have been Fall Instructs. I don't remember if it was Fall Instructs or spring training the next year. We got great. I think I had 2 different scouts that were down there talking up to me. And even at that point, I mean, this was pre-pandemic, so talked up his third base glove at the time. That's happened less in recent years.
Yeah,
but like, yeah, he can play there for me, that kind of stuff. And it's like, I think the Midwest League reports were good too. And look, he's hit everywhere, right? It's like, it's not, we don't scout the stat line, but he just keeps hitting. And like, look, he doesn't hit the ball incredibly hard, like compared to some of these other Dodgers prospects that have sort of, have sort of the optimized swing plane and the, the 90-mile-an-hour average exits and the 112, 114, 116 maxes, guys like, Michael Busch has that too, and also has similar defensive questions. Certainly Dalton Rushing and James Outman.
I mean, Vargas is pretty consistent, like 89. It's not like
it's like above average, right? But it's, you look at the frame, you wonder where he's going to play defensively, although it sounds like he might be the Dodgers' everyday third baseman this year. And you look at if he's not going to bring a lot of defensive value, he's going to not have a premium defensive home. I know they played him at second too, which also ambitious. Maybe in a pre-shift limitation world. Like, he's really got to hit 280 and 20 to 25 home runs every year. And he's put out the kind of top line statistics and underlying statistics that suggest, to me at least, he's going to hit 280 and 20 to 25 home runs every year. And it's not like a super sexy profile in that regard. Like, it's going to be a consistent, like, 3 to 4 win player. And when you have that kind of projection in the low minors, I think it's maybe a little bit harder to get on board because you want a little bit more upside. But it's like, hitters hit, and he's always hit, and we've always thought he's going to hit. So why not get on board early?
I remembered to mute myself before sneezing there.
Yeah, good job.
So Vargas is like one of these guys where, like, he doesn't hit the ball like incredible. Like, he's not going to like lead the league in barrels, right? But everything he's hitting is hit in the air without a lot of mishit. So there's just like, there's a lot of like line drives at like an 18-degree launch angle that are hit like 89, 90 miles an hour. And that's a lot of singles and doubles that add up over the course of time. Like, that's fundamentally one of the things that drives hit tools. He's not, Kyle Manzardo in the Rays system is another guy like this, where just like, yeah, the 90th percentile exit velocity is not that great, and the average exit velocity is only okay, and like the contact and the chase is good, but it's nothing like spectacular. But just like the ground ball rates are in the 30s, the fly ball rates are in like the 40s or 50s, and like just everything's in the air, medium hard. I was just writing about Jeff McNeil today because he signed an extension, and I'm our local Jeff McNeil enthusiast for a variety of reasons. Which probably aren't worth getting into on a Dodgers podcast, but I basically demanded to take our transaction analysis on Jeff McNeil. And it's like, okay, why is Jeff McNeil's expected batting average every year 30 points lower than his actual batting average? And it's like, yeah, it's because he has horizontal spray and hits the ball in the air with line drives all the time. So even though he's like never hitting the ball over the fence, like, his entire line drive profile is just like red dots everywhere that went for singles and doubles. Vargas probably isn't going to. Vargas doesn't have that degree of contact, so he's not going to. I'm not saying that. I don't think
he's going to hit 320. Yeah,
right. I don't think he's going to be batting tight. Jeff McNeil is over a 300 career batting average, but 270, 280. He's got some more over the fence pop, and defensively, who the heck knows? He's in an area of the list, and going back, I think this is like the 4th straight year he's been in areas of the list that were like relatively weak compared to like normal years. So he just kind of keeps moving up by attrition and up and up and up. But yeah, he's one of the more likely players in the minors to be like exactly like a 2.5 win regular, probably as soon as this year. So those guys are always kind of tough to rank compared to, the super high upside. We have no idea if this guy can hit yet player. Jason Dominguez, right? I know. But Vargas, yeah, I mean, look, there's, we were really high on Dustin May compared to the rest of the industry, and everybody caught up, and theoretically he's a good major league pitcher when he's not hurt now. I hope to see that this year, right? So that happens, and sometimes we're behind on guys too. And
we're catching up on Taj Bradley this year, for one example.
Cartaya is an example of that, to be honest. There were other people that were higher on Cartaya earlier than we were. So, it kind of, everybody has those sorts of you're a year early, you're a year late. If you're any good at it, you usually get there before the guy hits the majors. Hopefully we do that.
Defensively on Vargas, I mean, what are we? Are we talking about a guy who is average defensively at either second or third? Is he below average defensively at second or third?
I think he can be like a 45 at third. Like, he throws pretty well. He's never gonna be the rangiest guy, but he's got good hands. He's got good actions. I think the Dodgers will still be able to position him well enough. I know, like, the third baseman doesn't shift it like a ton anyway, and the new shift rule I don't think will super impact that. He's not a guy you're going to put in like medium depth right field in that overshift anyway. I think you'd put like a Lux there or something like that before you'd put Vargas there. You know, it's just tough to tell. I know they've like dabbled with the idea of him playing some corner outfield too. I don't know if I'd do that, but I think he's the guy that you can move around the infield, you can position, and it's never going to be pretty. He's not going to win a Gold Glove or anything, but I do think he gets, because of the way he looks, and he can look a little bit awkward defensively too, he gets downgraded more defensively than he's actually going to end up. Like, you're going to look up at the end of the year and he's going to be -5 outs above average, and you're just going to go like, all right, fine. He hit 280 with 20. I don't really care. You might not even notice it in the field too. Like, it'll be like balls that just get by him, or dribblers in that he doesn't quite make plays on. And look, those add up over the course of a season. But I don't think he's going to be a butcher or anything like that.
So you want to talk about Jarrett's favorite guy?
I will. So very different offensive profile, Dalton Rushing. I think most people, or at least enough people, saw the performance last year after he made his debut. I don't think as many people know about the batted ball data and why, you know, the performance might be legitimate. You guys talked a little bit about him.
And I want to add real quick, when I was on a group message with these two, Jeffrey was giving Jarrett a little bit of a hard time, asking if he was going to have Dalton Rushing ahead of Diego Cartaya. He said no, but he didn't necessarily say it was an easy no for him either. So, Jarrett, I'll let you take this one.
So, like, Dalton Rushing at last year had, 92-mile-an-hour average exit velo. His zone contact was in the mid-80s, and his chase was in the low 20s. If you rank Dalton Rushing solely based on what he did at Louisville, how he looked at Louisville, and how he looked in the Cal League after the draft, and completely ignore the rest of his background, in which he was a backup catcher, granted to Henry Davis, who was the number 1 overall pick in the 2021 draft, Rushing is one of the best prospects in baseball. Now, we don't do that, or when we do that, there has to be like some type of foundation there. Like with James Wood, he had a long track record of this type of performance on the showcase circuit earlier in his prep career, and also was like 6'7", 40, and built like an SEC tight end or like something like that. And Rushing's kind of, but not.
He's built like a catcher, man.
He's built like a catcher. He's not like the world's greatest defender at catcher either. And some of the visual markers are like a little less exciting than, this guy might be one of the best hitting prospects in the entire minor leagues. But if you take this purely at face value, like, this is one of the best TrackMan printouts in the minors. And also, the dude hit 400 with power and as many walks as strikeouts. If I've made this point before, this is an old Bill James point from like 30 years ago. Like, when I was a kid, I was reading this in the old baseball abstracts. When a player has a performance that's so outlandish you can't believe it, instead of trying to put it in context, you dismiss it entirely. If he had hit 335 with like 3 more strikeouts and walks, it would have been taken a lot more seriously than him hitting 400 with an even ratio, because nobody's going to hit 400 with an even ratio. It's the same thing as Jackson Holliday's walk rate in low A after the draft. Like, he walked so much that people just like were like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. it means something. It just doesn't mean it doesn't mean Dalton Rushing is going to hit 400 in AA this year. He's not. But if he hits, 310 with this continuing power surge and just like this tremendous batted ball profile, yeah, he's going to be one of the top prospects in baseball at midseason and next season. I understand he was the 40th pick in a draft that happened 6 months before we locked the list. Putting him in the 50s was just like, but we got down to, we had the same conversation with Spencer Jones that we had with him, where it's like, these guys were 1 year college wonders, but what they did after the draft, and not huge sample sizes, but not tiny, like sample sizes are large enough that the batted ball and plate discipline data is actually somewhat sticky. Basically confirmed what they were doing with the ping bats as the 1 year wonders in college. So it's really hard to rank guys like this. We're going to have the same conversation about Nick Frasso in a minute, because, Nick Frasso is a guy that coming into the season, I knew his name, but it was like, oh, that's that guy in the Blue Jays system that never pitches. And at the end of the season, he's on the 101, despite only pitching 46 innings or whatever it was, 54. I don't remember what the exact number was. It was around 50. It's just it's really hard to contextualize this versus, say, a Miguel Vargas that's had a pretty standard prospect career where he's had, 400, 500 plate appearances every year. He's moved up about one level at a time and has kind of generally performed as expected. Everybody's international signings are a bust, by the way, for the chatter that pointed that out. Everybody busts in international free agency. That's just what happens. Cartaya didn't bust, or at least hasn't yet. But Dalton Rushing's just I don't know. I wrote an article in August that suggested that he might be a better prospect than Henry Davis, and he ended up, which is an easy comparison. And one of the reasons I wrote that was to make a point that I think that player development context does matter some in these. We know that the Dodgers are really good at developing these and Rushing and Davis are also facially very similar types of prospects in terms of, batted ball data monsters. Davis is a little more swing and miss. The Dodgers are just much better at developing these prospects than the Pirates, as shown by the fact that the Dodgers are picking 40th in this draft, because not only did they finish with one of the best records in baseball, they got kicked 10 spots back because of the luxury tax penalty. And they never draft high. They make the playoffs every year, and they're going to be a top 3 farm system and put more players on the 101 than anybody else. Of course, the Dodgers are better at player development than the Pirates. Why wouldn't we consider that as part of the context? Yeah, they might get traded, but all of the development that's occurred to this point is still significantly different. And that you have to be careful when assuming too much context, but I said I would pref Rushing over Davis at that time, and they were pretty darn, I think they were 8 spots apart on the list. So I think kind of things started to come around to that. I know nobody else is going to put Rushing on their top 100 this year. I don't care. I think I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'll eat that too. So
Jeffrey, are you? Do you think Rushing's a top 100 guy?
So Jarrett pitched me on the Rushing versus Davis thing for a month, basically, I think, before he finally wrote it.
Yeah.
And
I was talking about that in July,
I'm just write whatever you want, man. We'll deal with it at less time. I'm not your editor. I don't really care. So when I was doing the Dodgers background and stuff, I pulled up the Cal League video, and I don't think we actually got a look at him. I think Brandon might have seen him late in the season and wrote him up. I don't know. I can
actually check that.
Go ahead. Well, I talk. But I pulled up the video anyway, because I always like to watch. I want to see what the swing looks like. And literally, I think 2 at bats into the look, I'm like, oh, Jarrett's right. It's it was not it was just okay.
That I'm right.
I do. I don't enjoy
especially
it, especially on these kind of
galaxy
hot takes. Yeah. I'm just everything dude looks like he's gonna hit 30 home runs in the majors and make a decent amount of contact. It's a good approach. It's just one of those swings that works. And it's kind of exhausting doing the Dodgers background work, especially for hitters, just because every single one of these swings are optimized to hit balls like 95 miles an hour plus between a 15 and 25 degree launch angle. And like the result of it is, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of swing and miss in the zone. Like it's not going to be elite contact levels, it's going to be like 80 to 85%, I think, as we've talked about with some of these guys. And like, look, they're going to miss those good breaking balls down in a lot of cases because they're trying to lift. And like everybody misses the good breaking balls down. Everybody swings at the good breaking balls down because they look like, stuff at your thighs that you can hit hard until they don't. Pitching, and it's like there's a lot of guys with not a lot of guys with Nick Frasso's slider, to be fair, but there's a lot of guys that can throw that hard downer slider, that hard downer curve. Pitching is just as optimized as hitting, probably more so in this day and age. But when Dalton Rushing gets he's going to do a lot of damage with it, right? He's not going to be popping out to second base or rolling over on balls to the infield. He is going to hit hard line drives and hard fly balls that are more often than not going to go for, not more often than not, but often enough, go for extra base hits and home runs. And yeah, he's not a great catcher. He can catch. If there's like an ABS system, he's probably like your ideal catcher because he throws really well, and he's gonna hit for average and power. And yeah, like we ranked too many catchers now, especially the last couple of years for whatever reason. But Rushing's not the one I'm worried about on this list.
Well, considering the Dodgers just specialize apparently in developing catchers, yes. I'm fine with you ranking a ton of catchers in your top 101 for years to come. Let me follow up real quick on a guy you just mentioned. He's another guy that, in some ways is like the pitching version of Rushing, in that you guys seem way higher on him than other folks that I've talked about. So I see a smile on Jarrett's face.
This one's Jarrett.
This one's
Jarrett.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. Hey, I love it. So talk to me about Nick Frasso, the return the Dodgers got for Mitch White, and was it DeJesus was the other piece in that trade?
Yeah.
So this was Frasso was a guy that I flagged when he was in the Blue Jays system as a guy who came up in our midseason 50 research that I was surprised that came up. So he was somebody that a pro scouting analyst mentioned to me, like, holy crap, this guy's like really good. Like, I know you don't know. Like, so there were 3 pitchers that started the season in Toronto's low A affiliate, and all of them were hitting triple digits, and all of them were posting like crazy whiff numbers. And that's a TrackMan Park, so this was available. And it was Ricky Tiedemann, who ended up in the top 20 of the list. Yasser Zulueta, who was also in that group of like 5-6 guys that just missed, and Nick Frasso. And Frasso was actually posting the best whiff numbers of the 3. Tiedemann ended up advancing further and pitched a bunch more innings, and is left-handed and has like better looking stuff, so he ended up being like higher. It was also way younger. But Frasso
doesn't have an elbow sleeve surgery. Yeah. Recent memory.
There's a lot of stuff going on there. But Frasso was flagged to me by a pro scouting analyst in like, I don't know, May or June, as I was doing midseason 50 research. Is like, this guy's not going to make your midseason 50, but like you should at least be aware of them. He's like, the whiff rates on the fastball and the slider are both like incredibly good, and the changeup isn't there yet, but it's like our stuff model really likes it, which ended up being confirmed by like 5 other teams later in the process. So I'm kind of following this guy along, and I watched a couple starts, and I pulled like the full TrackMan. And he's not pitching a lot. They're pitching him like 3 innings on like 6 and 7 day rest cycles. So I'm kind of just watching along, and then I'm sitting there at the trade deadline, kind of we're in Slack going through all this stuff, and Dodgers trade Mitch White to the Toronto Blue Jays. Yeah, sure, that's not going to be for much. They probably got Esteban Machado back, right? Yeah, they got Nick Frasso. So, I mean, there's 2 teams that are just like incredibly good at this one thing, which is that they will scout your system better than you scout it. And it's the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Tampa Bay Rays. If the Tampa Bay Rays at Rule 5 time If you want one of their players
Yeah.
and they ask you for a complex league back, just like hang up the phone and hope the guy doesn't get Rule 5'd or put him on waivers. Just like it's not. They picked up Curtis Meade that way. They picked up Junior Caminero that way. It's just like it's not good. You don't want to do it to yourself. So yeah, I mean they traded Mitch White, who's like I'm sure everybody listening to this knows Mitch White's.
He's a nice major league arm that's had a lot of injuries.
He's fine. And DeJesus, yeah, he might be a utility infielder, and they get back Nick Frasso, who's putting up like Gonzo whiff rates with 2 pitches and has another one that might get there. So like it, and if you visually watch them, like it looks right. The slider doesn't look like it's producing 40% whiff rates, but it's producing 40% whiff rates. Something we've kind of been finding over the past few years is that like these big, beautiful, like planey sliders, and especially curveballs, actually tend to be really easy to lay off of, and the ones that produce tons of whiff and chase are actually kind of the slider ones, or the tighter ones, or the ones with lateral movement, not necessarily what you'd think of as like this classic beautiful slider. And his kind of falls more into that category than this like classic beautiful pitch. But you know, look, if you're missing that many batters, and I don't have an obvious reason to say you're not a top 101 prospect, you're probably a top 101 prospect. I am also completely unsurprised that the Dodgers, in a period where they were buying and were in the playoffs and were headed towards a top seed, sold to get him in particular. That's also telling you something, right? Like the Dodgers clearly targeted this guy and sold a major league player to get him at the deadline. And the Dodgers, again, I don't love appealing to the authority of teams that are good at this, but the Dodgers are good at this. So is there considerable skepticism about whether Frasso is a long-term starter? Yeah, he didn't throw that many innings. Is he going to be a really good reliever if he ends up as a reliever? Yeah, probably. Are the Dodgers better positioned if he ends up being a 90 or 100 inning guy to maximize those innings in the greatest leverage scenarios and send them on 14-day Phantom IL trips all the time? Yeah, they are, because they specialize in that too. So that's my Nick Frasso take. I just like the idea of ranking Quinn Priester ahead of him because Quinn Priester looks right on the mound and has
4 pitches, sinker slider,
and was a prep first round pick. Like, so first of all, like Quinn Priester didn't miss any bats, and that's like kind of important, but I don't know. It's just like the idea of like doing that because I'm supposed to is never appealed to me, and like we've been doing this long enough that people can think whatever they want, but I am going to push this profile to the ends of the earth, like I just always have. Like if you've got 2-3 pitches that are like whiffing everybody, and you're not doing it based on like some type of weird deception that's not. And again, Frasso's not doing this like 87 in command. It's like 94 to 100, and it's like this is actually big stuff. Do I care that he was a mid-rounder that missed a ton of time with elbow surgery? Yeah, it matters a little, but it's getting back to the Gavin Stone discussion from earlier. At some point, you kind of have to drop your priors and just go, this is probably what this guy is now. And like all pitching prospects have injury risk. They're pitching prospects.
Jeffrey, I love watching you as Jarrett goes on about guys like this, because that's just like, I wonder how many times you've heard him make the
a lot. Nick Frasso, a lot.
Yeah, on this particular one, we had this discussion.
I mean, again, this is one where I don't disagree. I think there's more reliever risk than Jarrett does, but again, I think he said at that portion in the list.
It's not that you think there's more reliever risk; it's that you care more about the reliever risk.
But I also like at the back end of that, of any 101, there's going to be guys with significant reliever risk. So it's just the way it is now. And I think he can be a multi-inning guy. I think he can be a that sort of 2-inning fireman role. or 4 to 6 out guy, whatever you want to call it, and just spam the fastball and slider. And like if he could stay healthy, it's like 2-7 pitches. You know, what's the difference between? This is a weird comp, but like, what's the difference between like Frasso and like Tyler Glass now at the same point? I mean, Frasso throws more strikes, I guess, is the short answer there. And I'm not saying that's as a comp or projection, but it's just one of those things where we're pulling a year early here because he hasn't put that season together where he's thrown 100 innings in the minors. And if he throws 100 innings next year, some of them are probably going to be in the majors. So
yeah, it's like you start comparing other pitchers in that area. Cade Cavalli has the world's worst injury track record and ended the season on the IL with shoulder problems. Max Meyer is recovering from Tommy John surgery. Brandon Pfaadt's a guy that I think should be higher on the list, but Jeffrey, again, doesn't necessarily see him as a starter and has live looks that I don't. Mason Montgomery has like the world's worst delivery and is kind of just very similar to this, but also had like an absolutely awful college career that's not as far in the mirror even as Frasso's. Wilmer Flores, the younger, is an undrafted free agent. Kyle Muller is throwing like 400 innings at AAA at this point. Jackson Jobe just might not be any good. Connor Phillips doesn't throw any strikes. DL Hall doesn't throw any strikes. Ken Waldichuk might not have a bat missing pitch in the majors. You start to go into the next 10. Jack Leiter was just like dreadful last year in every conceivable way. Hayden Wisniewski is no more obviously a starter than Frasso is. So it's like, yeah, like all of these guys have knocks. Otherwise, they'd be like the pitchers with this profile that don't have knocks are in the 30, or in like Mick Abel, Gavin Stone land. So, I don't.
Jeffrey, I'm about to ask about James Outman, which I gather is maybe going to go right back to Jarrett here. Sure. So is there somebody in the organization you want to talk about before I ask him about Outman? Because I just want to balance this out a little bit.
Talk about Andy Paz.
I don't really want to talk about Andy Paz. I mean, he's fine. I'm trying to get away from this profile a little bit, mostly unsuccessfully. But guys like Paez, Owen Casey, who's this kind of hitter broadly to these like power only corner bats with hit tool questions. They all hit, like Paez hits the ball really hard. Owen Casey hits the ball really hard. And there's between, again, low minors in a lot of cases versus upper minors. You get into like really fine zone contact and chase questions here between these, like in terms of like actualizing the power. And I saw some scout on Twitter tweet some sort of like broad, it wasn't really like a huge anti-analytics broadside, but sort of the idea that, exit velocity, well, it just sounds different. And yeah, a lot of these guys hit the ball incredibly hard. It just sounds different. Can you tell me the difference between like 108 and 112? Because that actually has a big difference over the course of a season in terms of like 90th. If you're hitting 10% of your balls over 112 versus 10% of your balls over 108, that's a lot of balls. That's a lot of balls in play over the course of a season. And this gets in with like zone contact too. At the margins, right? If you're like around 80%, I'll use Michael Busch as an example here. Michael Busch this year was around 80% zone contact in AAA. He was like 91-12, I think, on average and max. That's all like a little bit above average. The zone contact kind of broadly average. Once you get down to like 77, 75, now you're talking, first of all, it's going to get worse in the majors. Yeah. So if Michael Busch goes from 80 to 77, 78, he'll be fine. He doesn't chase. He's above average or below average chase rates, where you want to put it. And he hits the ball hard when he makes contact. And he'll make enough contact over the course of the season where it'll be, again, 250, 260, 25 home runs. He'll get on base. With these like power only guys, they either have to chase at a below average rate or they have to have like 75% plus zone contact. Like Rafael Devers is a good example of this. Rafael Devers just signed for $300 million. Rafael Devers, his zone contact rate's fine. It's a little below average, but it's fine. He chases about as much as anyone in baseball. Now, when he chases, he actually makes a fair amount of contact. It's not always good contact, but he hits the ball. I think it was like something like 93, 116 this year. Just absolutely crushes the ball when he hits it. If you can produce those kind of quality contact outputs, you can get away with suboptimal zone contact and chase rates. This is all to say, like, Andy Paz, I think, hit like 240 this year in the minors. That's tough to maintain up the ladder. He hits the ball really hard when he hits it. And if you just get the home run clips, it looks great. Like, it's just one of those absolutely launch angle leverage swings. And if he hit 30 home runs in the majors, you're probably a top 101 prospect, or should have been. It's unless you're like, I guess, Chris Davis. More, and that's the other problem with Pages too, is we got the defensive reports in corner outfield weren't great this year, and that would worry me too if he's got to be like a first baseman DH. Because then who else hits the ball really, really hard when they make contact? Edwin Rios. But it's like it just becomes a tough profile, and I try to get off it, but there's like enough here still with Pages and with Owen Casey that I'll let it play out another year, but I would worry a little bit about that. Like, there's absolute reason to believe, and I'm sure Jarrett's going to make this case in a second, that James Outman is a significantly better prospect than Andy Paz.
Jarrett, talk to Outman. I'll preface the Outman thing with this, like, because coming up, it always felt like the glove was going to be fine. He was going to be above average defensively in the outfield. The question was whether he could hit. And then he has this huge year. He comes up to the majors and hits 2 home runs or whatever in his first. He hits a home run in his first at bat. But what I started to hear from people who actually talk to other people was that there are people around the league that actually believe in Outman's hit tool now. That people around the league are saying, hey, this isn't just a fluke. Like, this guy didn't just run into a couple. That the hit tool might actually be good enough on top of a defensive profile that already seemed like he was going to be fine as a center fielder at the major league level. Is that kind of what you're hearing?
Yeah, so look, there's always going to be contact problems here. This guy just, like, it's a long swing, it's a hard swing. It's not, he's going to strike, if you play him regularly in the majors, he's going to strike out 155.
We want to hide him against tough lefties to an extent, too.
It's he's swinging hard, he's swinging up. It's not the short swing. So that's just going to be a part of the profile. But again, he's another one of these guys. Jeffrey was going to the idea that if you have this type of swing and miss, you better kind of have everything else. Outman actually has better swing decisions than Pages, and it's just like it's hard contact in the air, just like all the time when he's making contact. The Dodgers have done something recently, which they're obviously doing this as an organizational philosophy, just based on what they're doing. They've moved their hitting prospects up very slowly compared to other organizations. Outman started the season back at Double-A after having a successful season there. So did Michael Busch. And these are not guys that are 22, 23. They're 24, 25. And they're giving them extra time at the level and letting them dominate the level before they move up, which they're smart people that think that that's the best way to do things. The Dodgers can afford that luxury because of their quality at the major league level. They
were batting Trace Thompson in playoff games, so.
Yeah, that's.
And I like Trace Thompson.
And maybe Outman should have gotten a shot, but yeah, Trace Thompson.
He hit, right. He was a leverageable outfielder.
Yeah. So that wasn't, and they might play Trace Thompson over Outman at times this year. That wouldn't shock me either. I think there's a chance Thompson just wins that starting job in camp and Outman's back in AAA. It's probably not likely. I think they're probably both going to be on the major league roster and play. You guys would probably have more thoughts on that than I do. But when you kind of look at Outman, look, if Outman was 23 with the exact same profile, he'd be in the middle of the list. He's 25. He would have been the oldest hitter on the list, other than Bush by a substantial margin, because Bush is also almost that age, which kind of made it a weird thing. And there's also, like, there's not this great track record because some of this hit tool stuff significantly improved. Started to hear the visual improvements in the 2021 Fall League and then improved further during the course of the 2022 season. So he's another guy who's kind of not, I think he was like a 7th round draft pick and kind of moved through the system a little bit slowly. So it's another guy where it's just these incremental ticks up. And now all of a sudden you're looking at this guy in AAA and it's like, man, like he can actually hit. He hits the ball hard and he hits the ball in the air. And like we were talking about previously with Vargas and some of the other players and Rushing especially, these are the foundations of a successful hit tool, along with making a lot of contact. But if you can't make a ton of contact, you have to be able to do other stuff well. If you hit the ball 86 miles an hour into the ground all the time, you're going to make a lot of outs. If you hit the ball 96 miles an hour at a 14-degree launch angle, yeah, you can hit it directly at a fielder, but most of the time you're going to hit it in front of the fielder or into a gap, and you're going to get there. And, you know, is Outman like a stupendous center fielder? He's like, there's some tweenerish properties here. I think he can probably play there. The Dodgers are also really good at positioning outfielders. You know, Cody Bellinger ended up being a really good center fielder after a period of time. And when they first started putting him out there, like he barely knew how to run routes in center. I think he had one game in the playoffs where he looked like absolutely terrible out there. And it was just like, it's like his straight line speed is still making up for it, but he ended up developing better routes out there and he ended up developing better positioning because a lot of what we consider routes is actually positioning and kind of guessing is the wrong word, but like getting like that first step that you actually can't see because you have good predictive skills on where the ball is going to end up being prepared to get your route off is as much that first step as anything. So yeah, I look at Outman and I'm like, okay, yeah, he's already, I don't remember, he's actually entering his 25 or 26 season, but he's already 25. He's not an established major leaguer. He came up with a week. In that week, he just like absolutely tore the cover off the ball. Then they sent him down again. I just look at it like, I think this guy's probably presently like an above average major league outfielder, but he's way older than any of the prospects in this cohort. And like at the end of the day, we just like, man, I really wanted to jam him on the end of the list instead of like Alex Ramirez or somebody like that. But it's just like, yeah, he's too old. He can't actually do it.
I'll just say that again, this was I think of a point in the process where I just threw up my hands, was like watching James Outman video. It's like the Breaking Bad gif. They just can't keep getting away with this. It's the same like leveraged power swing. I'm just pulling this from Texas Leaguers. I don't know how much they are. Every team washes the TrackMan data a little bit different, but the PCL is a TrackMan league. You can scrape it from Baseball Savant.
Yeah. It's like 93 average, right?
It's only 92, but it's like
92, okay.
It's 92, 113, which is well above average. It's not elite exit velocities, but
I mean, that's an elite average exit velocity.
It's an elite average, but it's not
a super elite max, but that's an elite average.
48% of his balls over 95 miles an hour in the PCL last year. Hit the ball on the ground 28% of the time, which is just like ludicrous. So you look at that and like, if he can keep doing that or close to it, like he's just going to hit 30 home runs. Like that's the way you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I was the guy that, like, as we were entering the offseason and there was all this talk about a small percentage of people wanting Cody Bellinger back. I was like, are we sure that, like, James Outman can't give you 85% of the defense of Cody Bellinger with dramatically better offensive numbers?
Look, if you want to go out and trade for Brian Reynolds, go and trade for Brian Reynolds. I won't quibble with that. If you want to, you want to block, Outman by doing that, like,
But you can also just play Outman in a corner. Like they don't have like
they actually don't have that many outfielders.
Obviously, Mookie's there, but he might be playing some second base at some point. And, Chris Taylor's around, but he could be playing almost anywhere, and also might not be that good anymore. So like you've got like I said, I think there's a decent chance him and Thompson end up playing in the same outfield at various points this season. So,
you guys have broken our 2 unwritten rules. Jeffrey earlier mentioned Clayton Kershaw either not playing or playing.
I saw
in
someone in
Texas.
the comments was not happy about that.
That's against the rules. And Jarrett, my personal rule is we're not allowed to talk about Mookie Betts playing any position other than the outfield. It's like when that story came, like he's gonna play second base. I was like, do you guys know we have nobody else that can play in the outfield right now? Like, it's why are we moving him to a position we have competent people when we don't know who the heck is playing left field or center field for us next year?
I remember, I saw him at second base in the minors when he was in the Red Sox system.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's great. Don't get me wrong.
He's pretty good second baseman. Yeah.
So
I think I wrote him up as like a plus hit average power second baseman, and it turned out a little different in the end.
That's right. All right, Justin's gonna ask one more question, and then I want to get you out with just kind of a sleeper, sort of throw a couple names at me question. So Justin, you go for it first, and then I'll close this out.
Well, I'm going to kind of preempt your question just a little bit, but if there's a pitcher specifically, we talked a little bit about some of the arms lower down in the system. There's a guy not currently on the 101 you guys think maybe gets there this time next year. Who do you think it is?
You were the one that actually wrote these guys. So.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to decide who I want to pick here.
So Pepio, if he becomes that guy, is good. And Pepio was also in fairly decent 101 consideration. Yeah. He would have been like a top 1.
I almost feel bad for him because he's kind of boring compared to all these other. Like it's like a 7 changeup, but it's like it's fine. Like, and he's gonna pitch in the majors this year, but it's just not. He doesn't have like. Also, he's been around. We've written about him for a couple of years now. I think is part of it too.
So if Sheehan stays healthy and keeps throwing strikes, he's going to be on.
I mean, he's the obvious one. I mean, he wasn't that far off this year either. Yeah. I know he was 12th in the system, but he wasn't that far off this year. Yeah.
Give us a fun name that people maybe that you're talking about more than you feel like. Well, I guess Jeffrey, you don't read other lists.
You like Ronan Kopp.
Give me your Jarrett take. Give me your Jarrett take.
I do like Ronan Kopp. He has probably worse strike throwing. He has both a worse delivery for improving his strike throwing issues and worse strike throwing issues than pretty much any of these other pitchers that are all walking like 5/9 in the minors right now as well. But man, he's a big dude. It's a tough angle. Those breaking balls are brutal out of the hand to pick up for lefties and righties, really. And if he can just throw a few more, and he throws pretty hard too. It's not like he's a soft tosser. I just think if he can throw some more strikes, I don't know if he's going to. Like Maddox Bruns has the same issue. Like Maddox Bruns has absolutely disgusting breaking ball, and again throws very hard. I remember talking to an amateur scout that saw him his draft year and was like, yeah, it's really good stuff, but he threw like 2 balls to the backstop in warmups when I saw him in like a showcase. So, and I remember doing video on him. He threw like when he misses, it's like full like Bob Uecker, just a bit outside issues. I'm gonna pull a weird one because I snuck him on the list. Asemius Morales out of the DSL, and I don't like doing this because it's very difficult to get Dominican Complex League information broadly and specifically recently because teams like the Dodgers will go and pull and the Rays especially will go and try to pull your best Complex League players. So they don't like, I think teams prefer I don't know about Asemius Morales, and I don't know much about him is the thing, right? Because it's the Dominican Complex League. There's not really video. He wasn't like a huge notable IFA prospect, and he was signed in January and just pitched in the Dominican Complex this year. It's a really weird fastball. It's like super extension, but a weird spin axis with a low release height, and it's just it's low 90s right now, and there's like feel for spin generally, although he's not missing bats. He just feels like a guy to me. He needs to take a fairly big jump, but he just feels like a guy to me that might like show up and like blow the doors off your I guess it's the ACL now, ACL TrackMan next summer, or like a guy will start getting weird extended reports on. I was talking to a scout about him. There's like some risk that this is sort of what they're going to get out of him developmentally. And it's like not amazing right now for a 17-year-old in the DSL. And I was just going to be a long horizon here. But he was just a name that got flagged to me. Maybe the 101's a bit strong. I can't remember the last time we put a complex league arm on the 101. Like Anderson Espinoza, maybe.
We should literally never be putting complex league arms.
You should never literally be putting complex leagues on the 101. So
Harlan
maybe not.
Cesana
Maybe we'll just stick with Ronan Kopp. It's fine. We'll go with Ronan Kopp.
Harlan Cesana, the pitcher, the teenage pitcher that throws 103 that got traded in the Juan Soto trade, is like actually as good as a complex league pitcher like could plausibly ever be, and also made it out of the complex at the end, and we still didn't seriously consider putting him on the 101. My answer to this is River Ryan, who was not even on this list.
He would have been like, how many people did I put? I didn't.
23.
23. He would have been like 24 or 25. Like him
I
and like
was writing
Maya
this
were the
list,
last two guys. I can't. And Jacob Maya made the top 10 in the Marlins list. So.
The two guys that like got cut here because of essentially, or the three guys that got cut because of time constraints were River Ryan, Rain Duncon, and Jose De Paula. So Ryan has. I love two-way players that can.
Yeah, I know you.
In the pros, I was a big Tony Gonsolin guy as a prospect. I'm still a big Tony Gonsolin guy.
There you go.
River Ryan was a fifth-year senior sign out of a directional UNC affiliate for the Padres in 2021.
Like North Carolina Camembert or something. I forgot what it's actually called.
Yeah, it was some sort of directional UNC. I don't even know what division or conference that is in. It's not somewhere and he was drafted as an infielder. They took him as a second.
He was a two-way guy in college, but yeah.
Right, so he hits in the complex league. And also, to be clear, his Padres draft pick. He wasn't the Dodgers. So his 2021 Padres teens round pick is a fifth-year senior signed infielder. And the Dodgers, because they will rob you blind on every complex league trade, pick him up in the Matt Beatty trade during last year's spring training. Had not pitched professionally at the time. They confiscated his bat and put him on the mound.
It's something called the Peach Belt Conference, by the way, UNC Pembroke.
Sure. I used to be a college football coach and have no idea what that is, which is always good.
And by the way, real quick, I believe Beatty was DFA'd prior to this trade.
Yes, it was a DFA trade, right? So River Ryan at 23, 24 years old. And he didn't actually pitch that much in college either. He was like a spot reliever, pitched a little bit more as a fifth-year senior. But so he makes like his debut in low A like around his 24th birthday, because they then sent him to extended and do all their Dodgers things with him. And all of a sudden he's out there. He's like 24 at low A, but yeah, we're out here and it's like it's like you know, 3 above average pitches with like just killer track, man. Really high spin rate on the fastball and really great approach angle, and he's throwing it up there in the mid 90s, and he's got a nice breaking ball and a nice change up, and it's like, what in the absolute hell? Like, this guy, it's a fifth-year senior sign second base.
Division 2, by the way.
DFA trade. Like, this just isn't supposed to happen, right? It's not. How are they doing it again? They did it again. But yeah, again, if you look, and he didn't throw much either, because again, they didn't promote him out of extended until extended broke around the draft time. So he only threw like 40 innings.
He was throwing like 2 and 3 innings at a stint, too.
Yeah, if this was my list, he would have probably been in the mid-teens. But that's I'm gonna rely heavy on like these small sample TrackMan pitch datas and not really.
I mean, I also say like the difference between.
Yeah. He also has strike throwing problems, and it's not
they
clear.
All do,
There's
yeah.
like no clear plus off speed and all this stuff. But like, if this guy's made this jump from not even being able to make the starting rotation of UNC Pembroke to pitching really well in full season ball in a year, where's he going to be in another year with another year of Dodgers pitch design? So that's like my galaxy brain. Like he could somehow. Now, if he did, we're talking about another 25-year-old guy that we may or may not rank due to age. So I don't know if he's actually.
I mean, we ranked Gonsolin after Wilson yelled at us for 6 months straight, basically.
Yeah. It's a 7 splitter. You gotta rank him.
Yeah.
And it was a 7 splitter.
Yeah.
Right.
Jarrett, is there a galaxy brain hitter for you in the Dodgers organization that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, I mean, DePaul is like the easy one, right? Because he's just like, we don't have enough information on him. He's another DSL guy, and like DSL hitting data is even like sketchier than DSL pitching data. I don't know. Johnny DeLuca is kind of cool. Just as like he's another guy that we could have ranked on here and didn't, because again, these are all guys like that would have made other teams top 10s and most other teams top 15s. Like these guys are all like top 15 prospects in like the Mets system, right? So DeLuca is like a gazillion round draft pick. I think maybe I'm a JUCO or
he's Oregon. He was an Oregon guy.
Okay, I think. Yeah, he was like a gazillion round.
You're gonna get a text from Keenan about calling Oregon a JUCO.
Hey, I'm an Oregon guy up here, so it's like I gotta know my Oregon guys.
A gazillionth round draft pick that like didn't like he had like some name value like dating back to like when he was a prep, but he like didn't actually do anything in college. And then all of a sudden he gets into the system and it's hard contact in the air all the time because that's what the Dodgers do.
Okay,
I mean,
let me close with. Oh, go ahead, Jeffrey.
I would say like Eddie's Leonard and Jorby Vivas are both potential above average regulars. We haven't even mentioned them.
Yeah,
because they're not in the top 10. I really like Alex Freeland. I will say out of this year's draft, he's a little less like leveragey and lifty, but I think he's still like. I think there's probably still gonna be above average power there, and he can move around the infield, so he could be a breakout guy next year.
Yeah, we touched very quickly on DePaul. There was a chatter that mentioned him. Like he didn't hit the ball that hard, which was kind of why we didn't.
That's like if I'm gonna rank if I'm ranking him whenever it is 24th, that's gonna be the equivalent of mid-teens or higher, and even like a normal good system. Really,
right.
I need to see. I really want to see like good exits more than anything else. Even better than like, unless you have like really elite zone contact rate. Like there was a guy in the Marlin system we ranked, and that's some worse system that we ranked in the top 10 and he had good.
DePaul would have ranked in the top 10 of the Marlin system.
He probably would have, yeah. You really got to be able to like hit the ball hard for me. I think if I'm gonna put a marker down early. Like, would I be shocked if he comes stateside and he's like the 11th best prospect next year? Not really. I just couldn't get there this year.
Real quick on Michael Busch, because he's a guy that sort of sits in no man's land, and I want to ask the bat. I don't think anybody disagrees about the bat. I mean, I think Jeffrey, you might have joked that his best defensive position is in the third spot in the batting order.
It's an old Daniel Murphy.
Yeah,
Joe. He was asked in spring training, I think, when he was I think when he first started in the Mets system, like, what position do you play? He's like, I bat third.
I use this joke in the 101, so I can find it.
I mean, like, is he going to be average anywhere defensively?
Again, this is a positioning thing, right? Like he's played a fair bit of second base, and I think if you could do overshifting or position him deeper in some cases too, you could probably get him to average. Again, this is a team that just played Max Muncy at second. They played Miguel Vargas at second.
Like, is he in the same tier defensively as those two guys, you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably like broadly fair. He's not like he runs okay. He might be able to handle a corner outfield spot all right. Like, I don't know what the bar is for like average in a corner outfield spot nowadays. But again, I think so. We're in an era, and like some of this is going to change with the shifting rules. I don't think as much as people think. I don't know, but I don't think as much as people think in terms of like range of like defensive metric outcomes. And to be clear too, like whatever the Dodgers are doing internally for a defensive metric, it's going to be a lot more rigorous, a lot more granular than what you see public side, because they just have more data to play with. I think you can be fine with a 45 defender, especially not when you're now talking about a premium spot, right? Yeah. Wherever he ends up. He's not going to kill you. Like if you're playing like a 40 shortstop or a 40 catcher, even a 40 center fielder in 2022, 2023 baseball, and teams are going to be like, we really want to do that. Like you better really hit, right? Like Bo Bichette might be a 40 shortstop, mostly because of his throwing. Although I liked him in the minors.
We might see that with Gavin Lux at shortstop, depending on what some people think about him.
I mean, if he hits like Bo Bichette, I don't think he'll be complaining. But that's the thing, right? It's that you really, really got to hit. If you're a 40 catcher, you really, really got to hit. And like catcher, even some teams just won't do that, right? Like I don't think the Guardians would ever play a 40 catcher back there. They traded Francisco Mejia, who's turned into like closer to an average catcher. But there are teams that are really going to want premium defenders in those spots.
Yeah.
Like if he's a 45 left fielder, who cares? Like, again, you're not really going to notice because it's left field. And there might be some like medium fly balls you think he should get to, and he just doesn't, which, especially if he's got James Outman playing in center next to him, that might be a little, there might be some gaps out there. But again, if he hits, you're not going to care. If he doesn't hit, then yeah, it's a problem. If he hits 260 with 20 home runs and plays a below average left field, okay. Now you're talking about like a fringe regular. But if he hits, I don't think he's going to be you're not really going to worry about his glove. Like, really what was like Justin Turner at third base towards the end of his career with the Dodgers.
And we'll look, 260. We watched Chris Taylor, Cody Bellinger. We watched these guys play every single day last year.
That's the other thing too. I was talking about this with Craig Goldstein, our editor-in-chief, who is also a big Dodgers fan. Even going into the playoffs last year, and I think coming into this season too, it's like, man, they're going to win 105 games. That's what they do. But like that lineup doesn't really scare me. If I'm going in there with at the Padres with that top of the rotation, like I feel like I can pitch to these guys. But then I feel like we're going to look up in July and like James Outman and Miguel Vargas will have just dropped into that lineup and they'll be hitting 6th and 7th or whatever. And they'll hit, Vargas will be 290, 360, 450, and Outman will be 260, 350, 500. And, whatever he'll be sitting against tough lefties. And they'll drop in whoever, Chris Taylor.
Jason. Don't forget about the Jason Hayward Renaissance.
Oh, yeah, they did sign Jason Hayward. I saw I was thumbing through the annual and I saw his name in the Dodgers chapter. I'd forgotten about that. That would be like the ultimate. That's like the heat check, right? If they can make it's one thing with Chris Taylor, right? But if you can do it with Jason Hayward, suddenly hits like 250 with medium pop while playing a good kind of just.
The Yankees did it with Matt Carpenter last year. The funny part is the Rangers are actually the one that did it with Matt Carpenter last year, and then they let him opt out of the contract. That was
the choice you can make, yeah.
Well, hey, guys, I really appreciate your time tonight. You were super generous, Justin. I appreciate you joining us as well. Check out Baseball Prospectus. Any particular pieces? I mean, obviously, you guys, the 101 has come out. You've got the top 10 list, which is 23 names long in the Dodgers case. Anything else on you going to throw out your Twitter handles or pieces that you guys have coming out?
The Baseball Prospectus Annual just shipped. People have started getting it today and yesterday. I assume if you're listening to this, you probably know what the Baseball Prospectus Annual is, but I'll give kind of my pitch. It has 35-ish essays, 30 teams, plus a few other random essays on interesting topics. I wrote one of the essays. I also wrote a crap ton of player comments throughout the book, including about a third of the 101. Jeffrey also wrote a third of the 101. The book has our actual like scouting reports and thoughts on these guys. It's not just the list. So it has, how many? I think like 19,000 words about the top 101 prospects in baseball. So there's like a lot of, some of which are funny. Like I do a recurring bit of Alanis Morissette song lyrics, which I actually did with Frasso this year because the Blue Jays trading you for Mitch Voigt's like a really good breakup song. So if you're a top prospect, but it has a lot of information about all of these guys.
Well, our PECOTA projections for the upcoming season too, which I think the Dodgers are projected to win 105 games or something.
And PECOTA's not out. Like, we're not actually launching PECOTA on the website for another couple weeks. So if you want to see the first round of PECOTA, individualized PECOTA projections, the only place you can get them is the book right now. And the writing is great. It's Sam Miller's first baseball writing in way too many years. He wrote the Rockies essay. It's phenomenal. All kinds of other people. David Roth, Michael Bauman, Craig, Patrick Duke, Russell Carlton has a couple essays. So it's like an actual all-star cast of writers, and then me. So yeah, it's, if you check that out, that's the biggest thing we do. My Twitter is J.A. Seidler. I don't know why it's J.A. I just did that when I registered and immediately regretted it. It's not even my middle initial.
Awesome.
I'm on Twitter at Jeff Paternostro. And actually, I'm kind of disappointed by James Outman's PECOTA projection. I was going to read it out to sort of bring us full circle. I mean, they think he's going to be a league average hitter, basically.
We also have our own podcast for all you kids out there, in which we mostly talk about the Mets and professional wrestling, but occasionally talk about prospect stuff.
We've been talking a lot about Dodgers prospects because Jarrett does keep bringing them up.
Yeah.
I will point out that Dalton Rushing, who literally has not played outside of the complex, is projected to be only 6% worse than Major League average if they were to drop him in the majors now.
As this half-hour hit we were going to do goes to an hour and 20 minutes, I tend to be verbose about topics I'm interested in, so we tend to have lengthy podcasts if you have a commute and want to listen to talk about the Mets and AEW for some reason.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much again for the time, Justin. We appreciate you. Check out Baseball Prospectus. Pick up the book that, as they said, is shipping now and being received by people. So enjoy the rest of your night, everybody. And as always, go Dodgers.